In episode 23, we met Darby Orcutt, a librarian and professor at North Carolina State University, and we talked about how scientists, academics, and amateur researchers can work together to seriously investigate topics like Bigfoot, spirits, and other paranormal phenomena. Tonight, we catch up with Darby and talk about his new project, and I promise you want to hear about it. Welcome to the Peep Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Maroc, and on this episode, we're talking to an old friend about a new project. When I first interviewed Darby Orcutt back in August of 2021, we had a fascinating conversation about a wide range of topics related to the study of the paranormal, including a class he teaches at NCSU about how to investigate anomalous subjects. In the past couple of weeks, Darby launched a new project called The Study of Allegedly Morphologically Anomalous Samples, and it has the potential to find some paradigm-shifting results. He's been making appearances on podcasts that are mostly focused on the topic of Bigfoot, and I wanted to help him get the word out to an audience that might also be interested in the academic side of the research, especially how he managed to get this project approved and funded at a top-tier science and engineering university that happens to be my alma mater. Let's dive in with Darby. Hi, Darby. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, Nicole. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to talk to you again. Really happy to have you back on the Peep Podcast. And tonight we are going to talk about something that just got rolling recently. You have a project underway, and it's called The Study of Allegedly Morphologically Anomalous Samples. I think I said all that right. Those are big words.
Sounds great.
So what is this study all about?
What the study is that we're going to be soliciting and looking at various biological samples that people in the general public have collected or are collecting. Samples that particularly seem to have unusual aspects to them, whatever that may mean. And we're a little open on that constitutes. But let me give you some examples.
Okay.
So there are some folks who have been collecting what they believe is Sasquatch hair. And they have looked at this hair under a microscope, compared it to known species, can't seem to attribute it to a known species. And these are folks who are pretty familiar with hair, some of them. And they also have found that these unusual hearing hairs, they report that they have particular features that they share with one another, aren't necessarily shared with hair samples of known animals. So this is an interesting question. What are these samples and why do they share these characteristics?
That is a really good question. I hear you've been on a lot of podcasts lately, and you are getting the word out about this project. Where do you expect to get samples from? Like, what are you looking for? Citizen scientists, which most of the time in the Anomalous. Okay. Most of the time, and when studying anomalous samples, I guess we'd probably be talking about things like Bigfoot, maybe. are you expecting or hoping for samples from Bigfoot groups or field biologists or any set of people in particular?
At this stage, the samples that have been reported to me at this point are that these characteristics are alleged to be Sasquatch samples, or are presumed to be by the folks who have collected them. So certainly that is part of where we anticipate these samples from. We are open to folks who find any biological samples in the wild of that again appear unusual, but it seems like the interest is from folks who are alleging that they have Bigfoot samples. So I guess what I'm saying is that we're looking at unusual specimens. We are especially interested in those that appear to have a difference from known samples, and it's the case that most of those samples are being found and produced by folks who what have are Sasquatch samples. So I imagine that most of the samples that we get are going to come from the Bigfoot community, or from people who have had experiences or sightings and found these samples in conjunction with that. But we are also open to folks who have unusual biological samples of other kinds.
And you've talked about hair. Are you open to other types of biological samples, like maybe scat or something like that?
Absolutely. I've talked about hair at this point because that is the majority of the samples that folks have offering to share or said that they intended to share. But we are certainly open to other types of physical samples. What we are not really doing at this stage in the game is we are not doing eDNA or environmental DNA work.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not looking at soil samples trying to find evidence of something, or trying to figure out what creatures are in the area. What we're doing is we're looking at samples that at least appear to be from a biological. So that would be hair, be skin, that would be nails, their bone, would be a body part, that would be even an entire body that one couldn't identify. And that's actually a choice on the intake survey.
Oh wow!
We wanted to be available to really hang out the shingle that yes, we are willing to look at these things. Part of that is that these allegedly unusual appearing samples that have been found and have been reported, folks, haven't, by and large, even been looked at by scientists who may have the credentials and the expertise to be able to identify what they are.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the things that I felt was really important, was if people are reporting finding unusual things, scientists aren't looking at them, we'll never know what they are.
Mm-hmm.
There really is something unusual there, but you'll never find it. You can't find something that when you're not even looking at the potential evidence for it.
That's very true. That's a good point. Okay, so I have a really big question for you, since you know, part of the Peep podcast is looking at how scientists and researchers study things that could be considered paranormal. How on earth did you get backing and approval for this from the university?
Well, I think it's important, on the one hand, to note that isn't necessarily a paranormal study.
Mm-hmm.
These samples, these specimens that people are finding are something. I mean, whether they turn out to be a known quantity or an unknown quantity, one of the goals of the project is to figure out what these unknowns are. Are a lot of possibilities short of an unknown species. That's what I keep telling folks. There are a lot of possibilities short of an unknown species that could be very, very interesting scientific discoveries.
Mm-hmm.
For example, we know that among known species, take hair again as an example, there's a very different appearance hair that is coming from one part body versus another part. Different types of hair on human bodies and on the bodies of other animals, even in the same individual, let alone within the same species.
Mm-hmm.
Hairs that have unusual appearances, even if they are hairs of a known species, that could really tell us something about that species. That may be something that we have never noticed before. That these hairs that have this different appearance actually, again, a type of hair from perhaps a population of a known species or from a certain place on that species' body or what have you. So there are a lot of interesting questions that could come, a lot of interesting answers that could come, even if those who are interested in this from the Bigfoot angle, regardless of whether or not there is truly a connection there.
Mm-hmm. And so who is going to be actually doing the research work, the analysis on the samples that you're sent?
What I've done is I've put together a team of colleagues, and we are doing this work collaboratively. The core team that consists of 4 of us, faculty at NC State, myself as the principal investigator, but my colleagues who include 2 genetics and genomics experts, including one who has, in particular, who has a very strong background in forensics and wildlife forensics work. And then also a microscopist who does some really, truly amazing work and has the ability to really look at these specimens at an amazingly magnified level. Let me put it that way. He actually does light microscopy to the molecular level, which is something that a lot of people will even tell you is impossible. It's a very new technology, and he has the cutting edge equipment to actually do that level of analysis.
Wow. Go State. Sorry, I had to say that.
It's amazing. And you asked how did I put this together? And there are days that I do think to myself, I think, wow, how am I doing this at a Research One science and engineering university?
Right.
Because it's kind of amazing that we're doing this work, and that among the various questions that we are working on is this question of perhaps what may be underlying the Sasquatch phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
So Uh, but I think that that's what's really important to recognize is that how you do work that level university, when you bring folks together and you do collaborative work, one of the things that's really important in that is make sure that each collaborator, their research agenda being addressed through the work that's being done. So this is why I tell folks, this is not just a study that's about looking at these anomalous samples. This is certainly not a study about looking for Bigfoot, but this is a study that has a number of other outcomes. So a lot of ways that this study can and will succeed. One is by identifying anomalous samples and figuring out what's going on here. Other, developing techniques for forensic analysis, particularly genetic analysis. Other outcome is being able to train PhD students a way that PhD students in genetics don't often have opportunity to train, by looking at true unknowns. Actually, if you think about the training of scientists, they are looking at samples that know what they are, looking for certain features or what have you. It's a very different proposition, and it requires a different type of thinking to try to determine what a true unknown. There are other, so these, and then there are some other interesting questions. One of my colleagues has some interesting questions about lipid analysis. And we know that one of the types of samples that will be coming into the study are presumably of lipids, skin surface lipids from these alleged Sasquatch handprints, face prints, and things like that that people find usually on glass.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting phenomenon because people who live some of them in very remote areas will come home and find a really handprint the glass of their home and or their car, and they'll wonder, did this get here? It doesn't seem like it would be a person out here. We don't know why a person would be lurking around our house. Why would a person's hand leave this really thick, oily residue?
Mm-hmm.
These are the questions that these people are asking. And good questions. What is this stuff? And what's leaving these imprints?
Right.
Interesting question to me.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, one of my favorite shows of all time was Destination Truth, and it was Josh Gates going into the wilds of whatever country looking for whatever cryptid. Sometimes it was ghosts, sometimes it was other things. And I remember there was an episode where they were looking for a cryptid down in South America, and they found hair samples, and they brought it back to the US, and they took it to a laboratory that, had some special analysis tools. And it came back as a sun bear, but that's an animal that supposedly doesn't exist in that country. So it was still a very successful trip, even though they didn't prove that a cryptid existed. They did advance science by just going out and looking for it, and coming back with samples and having them tested. So you don't have to prove that Bigfoot exists to have a really excellent set of results out of a study like this.
Oh, absolutely. And that's something that's always interesting is when you get a known animal that is outside of its what's thought to be its range. And that's something that certainly is very worthwhile to find. And so that's certainly that's another possibility of something that we could potentially cover here is that certain species that known to exist in a region of North America. Well, if we start getting pulls from there, well, we may have to rethink think we know about the range.
Right. So if people want to send samples in, I will have a link to your project form on the show notes. But if they were interested in supporting your study any other way, how could they do that?
Well, appreciate your asking. A number of folks have been asking. They've been very excited to see this type of work being done, especially at a university that is NC State at that level. And so we do have a gift fund that supports that my work more generally. And I know we had a wonderful conversation a while back about the course that I teach
Mm-hmm.
and some of the other work that I'm doing to actually investigate actually strange things. And this particular project is a part of larger work that I do. But it's very exciting. And so I share with you a link to our donation page.
Okay.
And the university donation page where you can find that gift fund, which is called Science Society Strange. And donations to that will support this and related projects. And so folks who want to be involved in that way, this would be a great way to be involved. It is a gift to the university that you would be making. So it is, we are tax deductible, nonprofit, and furthermore, many employers will match gifts to NC State University. So you can make a gift to NC State University to this fund for this purpose, and your employer match your gift. So if you give $100, your employer may kick in another $100. So I don't know of any other place where folks can at this point take advantage of employer matches to fund this type of search.
Yeah, I think that's pretty awesome. And like you said, you will give me a link to the donation fund. And
Absolutely, I'd be very happy to do that, and very grateful for your sharing that, because I do know and that folks are very interested in seeing this work happen, and very interested in seeing this work continue. I think that's the important thing to think about as well, because we will be doing this study. We've just kicked it off, so we're not thinking at this time about when we'll end it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, at some point, that may become issue. I'm very grateful to my colleagues and for the work that we're doing together. But at some point, if we don't find interesting things in the samples that are offered to us, at some point, stop doing this. Now, nations can help that to continue beyond that point, because, like I say, at the very least, the one outcome that we know will happen is that it's very important training for PhD students in genetics to be able to work with these sorts of things. And so one of the things that I've talked with my colleagues about is if we did happen to get a large donation or a large amount of small donations, is the possibility. And what I would be looking to do with that is to think about putting those funds in an endowment that would pay a bit of interest each year, that could help fund PhD student or students to continue this work on into. Again, that's one of the things that I've been concerned about, is looking that there are individuals in the public who find things, who have questions, really have not had any credible place to send these things to find out what they are. So that's what I really wanted to establish. I've established it with this study, and I say it would be really nice to establish something like that on into the future.
Yes, definitely. So if you're listening and you have samples to send, there will be a link to that form. And if you're listening and you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, and maybe my employer will match my donation, I'll have a link to that as well. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about this. I know you've like I said, you've been on a lot of podcasts lately, and you've been doing some traveling, and it just always makes me just incredibly grateful when I know somebody's busy and they take the time to talk to me and my audience about what they're working on. And this is a very exciting project. So I appreciate it.
I am very, very busy lately, but I tell you what, it's a very good busy. There are a lot of wonderful things happening, and this is right up there on that list. And talking with you is one of those things that's up there on the list for me as well. So thank you very much, Nicole.
Oh, thanks, Darby. Thanks again to Darby, and thanks to you for listening. If you're interested in sharing your paranormal experiences with us, or if you have an idea for an episode topic, please reach out through the contact form at peeppodcast.com. That's PEEP podcast.com. Remember, that stands for People Experiencing Everyday Paranormal. While you're there, sign up for my newsletter to keep up with the podcast and all my creative and energetic endeavors. I only email it once a month. You'll receive briefs on recent episodes, information on any upcoming appearances, news, and some additional fun stuff. For example, in the latest edition, I had a link to download a free short story written by yours truly. If you enjoy the podcast, please give it some rating love on your favorite podcast app. Share it with friends and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Ratings and reviews help the podcast be found by others. A gigantic thank you to everyone who has given the show some love. I really appreciate it. No matter how you support the show, listening, telling others about it, financial support through the donate button on the website, or any other way, I absolutely appreciate your being here. Thanks again for listening. Stay safe and be well.